here. Welcome to the 8th grade project presentations for the class of 2023. We are so excited to be here and to have you here so that we can tell you all that they've been up to, and we, since some of us since last summer. There's so many milestones here at this Waldorf school, and this is one of the biggies, right? When you are in 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, start thinking about 8th grade year and what's to come. This is one of the big ones. And maybe even some of you 7th graders are thinking right now, what am I going to do next year? So we are so proud to bring you our presentations. We have 4 this evening, and I think we should just get started because you're here to see them, not here to see me. So, without further ado, we have our first presentation by Frances Levin, and I'm going to let her tell you all about that. I'm not going to give you a title or anything. And so, let's give it up for Frances.
Hi, as Ms. Mandy said, my name is Frances Levin, and my 8th grade project is writing a book. I chose this project because I've always loved telling stories through my writing. When I was younger, I started writing a lot of books but was never able to finish them. So I wanted to learn how to go about it in a methodical way that wouldn't end up with me backed into a corner. Since I knew it would be, difficult to finish an entire book in 8 months or so, I wanted to set myself up to be able to finish on my own after the presentation. By far, the easiest part of my project was finding a mentor. Lisa Key, a professional editor and author, has been a close friend of my parents for decades and my pen pal for many years. In the summer of 7th grade, I asked her to be my mentor, and she agreed at once. Since then, she's been an enormous help, and I couldn't have done any part of this project without her. One part of the 8th grade project that isn't always mentioned in the presentation is the research, because it isn't necessarily pertinent to the creating component of the project. I chose to study the history, struggles, and importance of queer authors, which I will talk about more later in the presentation. Since I didn't know everything that went into writing a book behind the scenes, I thought I should touch on it when I talk to you. The first thing I did was a long process of formulating the story. Every time I had an idea, I would write it down on a sticky note in color-coded ink and put it on the back of my door. The finished product is what you can see in the first picture behind me, and it's called a storyboard. Using it, I wrote an outline of my whole book, summarizing everything that would happen and the order in which it would. This took me a very long time, but once I had finished, I was able to go in a couple different directions. I started drafting my first chapter, which, as you can see from the 3rd picture, was just pencil scratches in a notebook at first. But once I started the editing process, I realized that typing was definitely the way for me to go. The first thing I did with my mentor was the large-scale edits. These are things like plot holes, character development, and general story flow. And as you can see from the 4th picture, that was definitely my least favorite part because it took a very long time and a lot of different drafts. Once I had finished it though, I was able to move on to the last stage of the editing, word edits. These are things like spelling, grammar, and little plot inconsistencies that I'd missed in my earlier run-throughs. As I was doing all this, I was also compiling my synopsis. This is something of an in-between of an outline and a whole rough draft. And since it was my first time ever writing a synopsis, I somewhat over-detailed and was leaning more towards the first draft. Since I think when you're at the beginning, more in-depth writing is never a bad thing, I won't complain here. Once I had finished my outline, first chapter, and synopsis, I had done everything I had accomplished everything I had set out to in the time that I had, and needed to decide what came next. Since finishing this book is so important to me, my mentor and I decided that as soon as I can, I will start the editing process on the rest of it. I've started an account on Medium, a blogging platform for writers, and my page is what you can see in the sixth picture on my slide. If you're interested in reading my book, my first chapter is already posted there, which you can get to by scanning the QR code on my board with your phone. It'll take you directly to my account, and you can read my first chapter there, or in solid copy on my board. Starting August 4th, once I've hopefully finished with all the other edits, I will release a new chapter of my book once a week for the public to read for free. That about sums up the creating component of my project, but as I mentioned, there's another branch, the research. I chose to study why fair representation is so important in writing and why it has only recently gained acceptance and even respect. I focus mainly on two queer authors in my research. Queer people have always existed, and as long as writers have lived, so have queer ones. So why is this such a hard subject for our society to approach? And why are their books still banned from public libraries? I don't understand it, and I think it's a real issue, so I want to learn more about the topic and educate my community on it. As I said, I studied mainly two queer authors, one from history and one alive today, Emily Dickinson and Nina LaCour. Emily Dickinson, born in the year of 1830, had to hide her sexuality so completely that it is now very hard for historians to verify one way or the other. The common consensus, however, is that she was most likely either bisexual or pansexual. This means she didn't have a preference in gender and cared more about people's personalities when she wanted to be in a relationship with them. Though most of her rumored relationships were with women, there were a few notable men in her life with whom she was rumored to be romantically involved. Despite what is commonly thought, Emily Dickinson was never very successful in her lifetime. She only ever published 10 poems, probably because she was a woman. But after her death, her sister found her hundreds of notebooks with nearly 2,000 poems, and from them she started to gain fame in America and around the world. Nina LaCour, an author currently living in the Bay Area with her wife and daughter, has been able to lead a proud and successful life, winning many awards for her books and helping and inspiring queer youth through her writing. The difference between the lives and careers of these authors marks how far we've come in the acceptance of change and individuality, but there is still far to go. Although it is usually legal to discuss and educate on the queer community, and yes, it wasn't always and still sometimes isn't legal, that doesn't mean it necessarily happens. It is a fair point to make that since the LGBTQ+ community is a minority, it makes sense that there's a smaller percent of queer books written, but those that are should be available to everyone. Some schools still do not allow queer books in their libraries, and LGBTQ+ youth all over have no place to read about people like themselves, an opportunity that everyone should have. So, if you want to read some queer books, but don't know where to look, I've made a pamphlet with 6th grade options, including one by Nina LaCour, which is available by my board, or for a more eco-friendly version, posted on my blog as well. Finally, to end, I will read a section from my own book. Chapter 1. Natalia Garcia sat on her couch, looking out the window of her living room. A slight crease appeared across her brow as she pressed the side of her face against the window pane, straining her eyes to see further down the street. Anastasia was supposed to pick her up at 12:30 for a long-awaited lunch date, but it was almost 1:45, and there was still no sign of her. After a few more minutes of eye straining, Nat peeled her cheek back off the window and drew a small frowny face in the steam that her breath had made against the glass. She sighed, but was not altogether surprised. Nat's girlfriend was not very punctual. In fact, being on time in any circumstance was a distinctly rare occasion for her, and being early was nigh unheard of. Annie worked 3 separate jobs. Her life's ambition was to become a great artist, and great she was, certainly. The problem was that her greatness was not yet known to many people. So, in the meantime, she was forced to make a living in different ways. This meant she was always running from place to place in total chaos. Nat found this quite endearing, but would never admit it to her girlfriend because she still enjoyed scolding her for it. Finally, these thoughts were interrupted by the sight of Annie's old beat-up Prius skidding to a halt beside the curb. Nat thought the car might have been silver originally, but since Annie had claimed ownership of it, she had covered every inch of it in colorful paintings of people, plants, and animals. Each flower petal, each dragonfly wing was made with breathtaking beauty, and in Nat's mind, there was not a more perfect vehicle in the entire world. She grabbed her purse from the couch beside her, snagged her coat from its hook, and burst through the door into the fresh May air to greet her Annie. If you'd like to read more, please visit my blog at medium.com. And if you're interested, I'd be honored if you checked out my pamphlet as well. Now, before I thank everyone who's helped me throughout this whole experience, I just want to say that this project has changed my life. I've always loved writing, but I never considered it as an actual career that I could pursue. I never thought I had the skill or perseverance to be able to write books for a living, but I think that might be changed now. I've learned so much and had to overcome unfamiliar obstacles, and if I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't change a thing, because it's been an amazing experience. First and foremost, I want to thank my mentor, Lisa Key, for being there with me every step of the way, comforting me when I was stressed, giving me advice when I was confused, and being one of my best friends. I'd also like to thank my teacher, Miss Mandy, for always having time for me, even though I'm only 1 out of 17. My family for their constant interest and support. My friends for rereading a lot of drafts of 1 chapter. And my unofficial editors and beta readers, Nora and Greta. And all of you for listening. Thank you. Any questions? Isla.
What's your book called?
That's a very good question. It was, what is my book called? The answer is, I do not know yet. I'm going to think about it a lot, and probably by the time the whole thing is self-published, it will have a name. I'll get back to you. Mari.
How did you come up with the names for the characters?
How did I come up with the names for the characters? For some reason, the main character, Natalia, I always sort of knew what her name would be. I really like long names with a short nickname, so I wanted Nat to be her nickname. And originally, the main character's name was Lillian. Well, the main character's girlfriend's name was Lillian. But I was in Spanish class, and I had a pamphlet talking about Natalia y Anastasia. And I was like, Anastasia, that's such a better name than Lillian. I mean, no offense if anyone here is called Lillian. But, so then she's Anastasia. Heron.
What draws you to chapter books rather than other forms of writing?
What draws me to chapter books rather than other forms of writing? That's a good question too. I'd say I'm not specifically drawn to chapter books. I've written a few short stories, which at some point I'd also like to post on my blog if you're interested. And I really like that form of writing, but chapter books have some way of depicting a whole passage of time that I really enjoy. I think it's a helpful way to divide a story up into pieces, and I like that. Ms. Martha.
What is the target age group for your book?
The question is, what is the target age group for my book? I would say probably young adult. The characters are in their mid to late 20s, I would think. The main character is out of med school and she's a medical intern. But I'd say it's probably directed at young adults because that's just what I know how to write, I guess.